Before I begin this video, I want to say that there are spoilers for the first day's results of the semifinals at the Midseason Invitational for the year 2019. If you want to watch just the first day, I don't know what's going to happen on the second day. I'm recording this briefly after the first day of semifinals. If you want to watch those semifinal games yourself without knowing who won, who lost, and exactly what happened, then click off of this video, come back, watch it later because I'm going to be spoiling the results. And there is a little spoiler warning for you. Now, give you a little time to leave, but that being said, in day one of the semifinals, Team Liquid just beat Invictus Gaming 3-1, which is one of the craziest results that we have seen recently in international play for League of Legends. Now, when a consequential and exciting upset or just exciting series of games happens, a lot of times people love to immediately label something the greatest thing that's ever happened. People will say, oh, this is the greatest upset that's ever happened. This is the most important series that NA has ever had at international events, so on and so forth. And when you do that, oftentimes things can get distorted a little bit. People might end up saying, oh, this is the greatest upset that's ever happened, to an upset that isn't the greatest upset. And then that will devalue the actual greatest upset that's ever happened. You know, a lot of the time people love to throw phrases around like that, which can be a little bit unfair, not giving enough credit to the things that actually deserve it, and sometimes elevating things that might not really need to be elevated or deserve to be elevated. So this video is meant to put this series that we just watched into context and talk a little bit about what this really was. This was flat out the most successful performance that a North American team has put up at the world stage at an international event. It might be the most impressive and successful event that any Western team from North America or Europe has ever put up at an international event. And there's a number of things that really make this an incredible series to see. And of course, this is before we even know what happens to Team Liquid beyond this. They might end up losing the finals. They might lose the finals to G2, who 3-0 them, and then, have plenty of people saying that Team Liquid's overrated. I don't know what's going to end up happening beyond this. But even if Team Liquid don't win another game at this MSI, this is possibly the most impressive run a Western team has put together, and certainly the most impressive run a North American team has put together, or at least the most impressive series, let's say. Now, think about some of the other previous international events that have had Western teams do well. Of course, there was 2016 MSI, where CLG was able to beat Royal Never Give Up once in the group stage. They beat SK Telecom once in the group stage, and then after getting into bracket, they were paired against Flash Wolves, who they beat 3-1 to make it to the finals, where they would lose to SK Telecom 3-0. That was an impressive run, but CLG, SK Telecom, I don't know, I forget if that was a year that SKT went on to win the World Championship, or if that was I think that was SKT, wasn't it? That's obviously very impressive, beating SKT when that was kind of in their prime, or certainly when they were very, very good, and beating RNG, who are considered one of the contenders to win Worlds that year. That's also a very impressive thing. But beating them in best of ones, and then they kind of lucked into playing against Flash Wolves in the semifinals to make it to the finals. So as impressive as that was, this is certainly much more impressive. Think about 2017 MSI. G2 had a very similar thing happen, where they were able to beat World Elite in the group stage, and then they got paired against them in the semifinals, beat them 3-1 to go on and lose to SK Telecom 3-1 in the finals. That was a very similar run, but just for G2 instead of CLG, where they were even more impressive, beating World Elite 3-1, because World Elite at that time, I think they were the second seed I think they were the second seed for China at that World Championship later that year. So they were a very impressive team, but that was still in the era of Korean dominance, where there weren't really any Chinese teams that were better than Koreans at the time. So still, maybe not necessarily the most impressive run that we've seen. And of course, there were a number of World Championships that there have been interesting Western runs. You can go all the way back to Worlds 2014, where C9 and TSM both made it into the quarterfinals, where they would take games off of Korean teams. One Korean team that went on to win the World Championship, Samsung, or they both played against Samsung teams and took games off of them, whereas one of those Samsung teams went on to win Worlds. There was 2015 Worlds a year later, where Fnatic and Origin then went on to make it to the semifinals, but they both got 3-0'd by Koreans. And, again, that was a circumstance where they kind of had favorable brackets. They didn't really make it to the semifinals because they were really the best teams in the world. They kind of got to play against easier opponents, and if they had to play against Koreans earlier, they would probably end up not have making it there, or not having made it there. 2018 Worlds, this past year's World Championship, was maybe the most impressive that we had seen in terms of just Western performance overall. Of course, you had C9, Fnatic, and G2 who all made it out of the group stages, where, C9, they were able to beat. They played against Gen G, and then I think they had Royal in their group as well. But, Gen G, they were a Korean team that was on the decline, and they were able to beat, of course, RNG, but in a best of one, and then they beat Vitality, who was more of an up-and-coming, a little bit underdeveloped European team. Then they were able to beat Afreeca Freaks 3-0, which, again, Afreeca, they are a Korean team, but they were a Korean team that's kind of overhyped and was on the decline a little bit. I mean, to this day, Afreeca has never won anything. They've never taken first place at any event they have ever competed in. They made it to Worlds on championship points that year. And similarly, Fnatic, they were obviously able to make it to the final, but they had a favorable bracket, getting to play against EDG and then getting to play against Cloud9 and G2. They were able to beat RNG, which may have been the most impressive single series that a Western team has had at that point, where G2 were considered, where RNG were considered possibly the favorites to win the tournament. And that was a really close and exciting series when they were able to beat them 3-2, but then they just got smashed by IG, and, IG kind of steamrolled their way to a world championship, really proving that they were the best in the world that year. Now, and that's the thing that's kind of been interesting about seeing a lot of Western teams make runs at international events. Back in the early years particularly, there weren't many circumstances where Western teams were really putting on super crazy impressive performances. Oftentimes you would see a team make a deep run just because they kind of got lucky, or because they had a favorable bracket. It wasn't that Fnatic and Origin were, crushing Korean teams, and that's why they made it to the semifinals of Worlds. I mean, I think for the first number of World Championships, there weren't really any circumstances where Western teams would beat Koreans in brackets. They could take a game off them in groups, but for the most part, I think every Worlds just had Western teams. They would be able to beat Chinese teams maybe, but it was just who got lucky enough to not face Koreans, who got lucky enough to not face the best in the world. And then once they did, they would get 3-0 and get knocked out of the tournament. This last year's Worlds, 2018, again, that was maybe the most exciting that we've seen, where that wasn't the case, where you did get to see some really impressive and exciting gameplay with, Cloud9 being able to sweep Afreeca and make it to the semifinals for the first time a North American team has. And, of course, Fnatic were able to make it to the finals, and they did beat EDG, which was a Chinese team, obviously, even if they did get to face against Cloud9 instead of Invictus Gaming, and then, eventually get 3-0'd by Invictus. But the point being, a lot of times there haven't really been impressive games themselves. A lot of the time when you think about the impressive runs that Western teams have made, you're thinking more about the fact that they were able to make it to a certain point, that they were able to make it to the semifinals, that they were able to make it to the finals. You don't really think that they put on impressive performances themselves, like the gameplay themselves. Maybe they were good and good enough to beat other teams, but they weren't able to hold up to the best in the world. And the thing that really makes Team Liquid's run impressive was that they were able to beat Invictus Gaming in pretty dominating fashion, and Invictus was pretty much the undisputed best team in the world. I mean, if Team Liquid played against SK Telecom right now, that would not have been as nearly impressive. Even if they did the exact same thing, 3-1 them, looked great. If they were to play against SKT, it would be, okay, that's very impressive. SKT does seem like the best team in Korea right now, or at least the most solid team in Korea that can hold up when under pressure. But at the same time, this isn't the best SKT roster we've ever seen. SKT still has plenty of flaws. They were able to take a game off of Invictus, but this is still a new roster with SKT. The thing about Invictus Gaming is that not only are they obviously world championships who were able to 3-0 Fnatic, 3-0 G2, and 3-2 KT Rolster to win the 2018 Worlds, not only were they able to win the They were able to win the LPL in this past spring split in pretty dominating fashion, where I think they finished second in the regular season standings, but they were able to beat, I think it was Top Sports Gaming, and then eventually JDG, who made it to the finals after a crazy run of being underdogs. I mean, they were able to pretty easily win the LPL. And they just crushed the group stage as well. They finished 9-1, only dropping a single game to SK Telecom. I think it's really hard to say that Invictus Gaming weren't the best team in the world before that series began. And on top of that, Invictus is in a really good spot with how everything works in League of Legends right now. One thing that's constantly brought up in League when people are discussing how the game is evolving and how things are going with the competitive scene is the meta. And some players do very well in certain metas, while other players might do, better or worse in certain, with certain champions being popular or certain champions being worse. Right now, Invictus is in a very favorable meta for their play style. They love to play aggressive. They love to put their solo carries or their solo laners on carries. You could very easily argue that Rookie and the Shy, or especially the Shy, maybe less so Rookie, but you could argue that they have the best solo laners in the world, at least the best solo lane duo in the world. And the Shy, a lot of people have been crowning him, myself included, have been crowning him the greatest top laner in the world, certainly, but one of the greatest, if not the greatest player in the world right now. And it's a meta that favors those kinds of players. Right now, this isn't a circumstance where the Shy wasn't able to play carry champions because we're in a tank meta, and even though he's super talented, he wasn't able to, to have an opportunity to beat Liquid because he wasn't getting his comfort picks or something. This was a favorable meta for Invictus Gaming. They had all of the momentum heading into this series, and Team Liquid had none of it. Team Liquid were 4-6 in groups. If Flash Wolves beat them one in their last game, then Flash Wolves would have ended up making it into groups, not Team Liquid. They would have been knocked out, same as last year, with a similarly disappointing result in series and everything. And another thing that really makes this series impressive is that this wasn't a circumstance where Invictus Gaming choked. This wasn't a circumstance in which Invictus Gaming, they didn't have anything going against them that was just unlucky. They were in a favorable meta. They had fantastic players, superstar players that we're going to talk about the gameplay itself in a moment, but those superstar players got everything they needed to go off. And this was just a circumstance in which Team Liquid played better. This was incredible how Liquid was able to play. They looked like they were SK Telecom in their glory days. I mean, they had virtually perfect gameplay to deal with everything that Invictus threw at them. And Invictus were doing everything that they've done for the past year. They've done everything. They've kept the same players and the same kind of play style and everything that was able to win them the LPL Spring, that was able to win them a world championship. They had everything going their way. And the fact that Team Liquid was able to beat them, and not just beat them, but crush them, even when Invictus got what they wanted, that's what really defines this as possibly the greatest upset and certainly the greatest performance that a Western team has put on. And you also have to consider, again, Team Liquid might end up losing the finals and they might end up getting 3-0'd by SK Telecom, let's say. Let's say they face SKT in the finals and then SKT 3-0's them. It'll be easy to draw comparisons to Team Liquid and CLG, for instance, or G2, where if you're just looking at the bracket, you're seeing, oh, they were able to make it to the finals of an MSI, but then they got beaten by SK Telecom, all three of those teams. Okay, that's impressive. They made it to the finals, but there's not too much of a difference in the performances themselves. But you have to look at the game itself. You have to look at the performances themselves. While G2 was able to beat World Elite and while CLG was able to beat Flash Wolves, those teams do not stack up to Invictus Gaming. Invictus Gaming is by far and away the best team in the world who had everything going for them, and Team Liquid had no business winning any of these games if they were to just play the way that they have been previously, or if they were to play the way that every Western team has played for the past 10 years. It was incredibly impressive to see what happened in those games. And we have to dive into the gameplay itself. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be putting footage of the gameplay itself up here. But again, you should probably watch the series yourself if you haven't already, even if I just spoiled it for you. But the gameplay itself was really something that was spectacular to see, because what's interesting is that Invictus Gaming got what they wanted a lot of the time. Invictus's playstyle is to have very aggressive players who are always going for early game plays in particular, always going for ganks and kills and looking to take fights to the enemy, really trying to get early leads that they will then snowball to win the game by late game. And that's exactly what they got. In games 1 and 2, I think they got first blood in both games. They had very big leads in the early game. They were able to get those early fights. They were able to get a lot of things that were really able to propel them to these pretty huge leads. In game 1 in particular, there was a point where Invictus had a 6k gold lead. They had the Baron buff. They had already taken Team Liquid's mid lane tower and mid inhibitor. And I mean, they had everything going their way. You couldn't really ask for a better circumstance if you're Invictus Gaming. But the thing that really was able to swing the game was that Team Liquid were playing to their play style that let them deal with it. I mean, again, Invictus had everything. They had these huge leads. They also had Rookie and the Shy getting a lot of the early gold in those games too. You know, we were talking about how they have these superstar players, you know, the Shy, best top laner in the world, Rookie, who people are saying is the next Faker and stuff. They have these superstar players that are able to do all this impressive stuff. But on top of that, these players were getting the carry champions they wanted. They were getting, the Shy and Rookie. They were getting first pick Rise. They were getting priority in champion select. Their team was giving them priority in terms of getting the picks that they want. And on top of that, they were getting the help from the jungle. I mean, Ning and just everyone was moving all over the map to try and get them these early kills, and they were getting them. They were getting early kills, early assists, first blood, early towers that would give them leads, and then that would allow them to get CS leads. And in theory, these are the superstar carry players who are getting gold funneled to them. They should be able to win this game and close it out against Team Liquid in the late game. But TL, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. TL was able to win by playing just flawlessly. It's really difficult to find any mistakes, any true mistakes that Team Liquid made throughout the series. Again, this wasn't many circumstances where Invictus was doing anything that was like uncharacteristic of themselves. They have a very aggressive play style, and oftentimes that does get them in trouble. That does get them caught out sometimes where they're overcommitting to a fight that they've already lost and should probably disengage from. And you could see that and say that's a pretty big mistake, but that's just kind of what their play style is. And hey, that play style won them a world championship in LPL Spring. So the thing that really ended up defining this series was that Team Liquid was just able to play it perfectly. If you look at the gameplay from each of the individual players on Team Liquid, every single player had a game-defining moment. For Impact, there was a moment in Game 1 where he got a triple stun. At that moment when Invictus Gaming was 6k gold up with mid inhibitor down, pushing down top lane with Baron looking to take a second inhibitor, Impact got a triple snare on, I think it was Rookie, the Shy, and maybe Ning. He was playing Nico and got a triple 3-man snare that allowed Team Liquid to win a fight. They went like 3-0 or 4-1 or something, and were able to then turn the game around. If he doesn't make that snare, Team Liquid loses that game. That was a perfect play from him. Similarly, later on in the game, Xmithie was able to catch out, I think it was the Shy mid lane with a great flag and drag into flash, where if you don't know, with Jarvan, you can use your flag and drag, but then flash after it. And even though it won't do damage to wherever you flash, if you flash on top of someone, that knockup will still occur. And he was able to do that on the Shy mid lane that was able to get Team Liquid a catch that won them a little fight, and that was what was able to give them the victory. I mean, it was insane how far ahead Invictus was, but Team Liquid played to their strengths. And then similarly, Jensen in game 2, I think it was, had an incredible 3-man ult with Orianna. There was a moment where he had to run pretty far forward in a team fight on his own on Orianna when Team Liquid looked like they were going to lose it. They were down like 4-2, I think. They were down 4 players to 2 in the team fight, or it was about to be 4-2. And then he runs forward and gets an amazing 3-man ult on Orianna. It was actually 4-1, I guess. Or not 4-1. No, yeah. Sorry, anyway. He was able to get an amazing ult that if he doesn't get that ult, I mean, similarly, that game in game 2, Invictus was, again, doing everything that they wanted. They were doing everything perfectly. There was a moment where they had a 3-man team fight where they got 3 kills for nothing in a team fight, and then were then able to go and take a free Baron. I mean, they were getting everything that they wanted, and the only thing that stopped them from winning the game was the fact that Team Liquid would not make a major mistake. Team Liquid's entire play style is based around having more reactionary play in the early game, not being too crazy proactive, but reacting when the enemy makes any sort of aggressive play, and then getting to the late game, having great team fights and outscaling to eventually win. And if they were to make any mistake throughout that game, or throughout any of these games, they were likely going to lose it. In those first 2 games in particular, Invictus was getting everything they wanted. They were using their early game aggression to get their gold leads and snowball, making it really difficult for Team Liquid to win any team fights in the late game with their scaling. And if they made one mistake, they were dead. They were gone. I mean, they had no chance if they made any little slip up towards the end of the game. But not only did all of their players have these crazy, insane moments, but they played it all perfectly and just flawlessly. And then, of course, CoreJJ and Doublelift. Doublelift being an AD carry, he doesn't have crazy individual moments the way an Orianna ultimate is a crazy individual team fight swinging moment. But he played pretty perfectly, as an AD carry, and he was able to pick Vayne in the final game that he got to show off how incredible he is as a player. He's been around for so long. He's had such a storied career. But the MVP of the series almost certainly has to be CoreJJ. He was able to do so well. He was able to have so many game-defining moments on all of his comfort champions where, if he was playing Alistar and finding ways to get in the back line of IG without them seeing him, and then get headbutt pulverizes on important targets, and, he was playing Galio and Braum in the other 2 games, I believe, and similarly just doing a great job with initiation, getting great Galio taunts, getting great Braum stuns, and protecting his team on Braum, and everything that he did was flawless. He was an incredible player himself, and again, Doublelift played nearly flawlessly himself too. Team Liquid's playstyle is described as Korean-esque. This is what players in Korea have done for many years, where they'll play very safe. They'll try and be as safe as possible, and they'll try and see if they can hit late game scaling, hit late game gold leads that allows them to eventually win games with these crazy, impressive, and insane late games. But just not messing up at all in the early game is what Koreans have tried to do, and being overly safe and overly cautious is a really important thing for that kind of play style. Recently, we, of course, have seen a lot of teams be dethroned from Korea. A lot of this play style that has dominated League of Legends for so long is being dethroned. It's being dethroned by teams like Invictus Gaming, who are now going on to win world championships instead of Korea for the first time. It's being dethroned in Korea by teams like Griffin, who's a new upstart team that's suddenly able to dethrone all these legends of the past because they're able to use this same sort of play style that League of Legends in general is just allowing people to be so aggressive and so powerful in the early game that it's really hard to not let a gold lead get huge and snowball against you. It's really hard to have a perfect series where you don't make any mistakes that will allow an aggressive play style to crush you. but Team Liquid was able to win even when Invictus Gaming got all of their perfect early aggression, even when Invictus had everything going right themselves. Team Liquid had impeccable decision making. One thing that really stood out about this series for me was that there were plenty of moments throughout it in which Team Liquid had their backs to the wall with Invictus being aggressive. So Invictus, they're going for the early jungle ganks. They're rotating players all across the map. They're going for solo kills if they can try and find one. But a lot of the time when there was a moment where someone in Team Liquid would be in trouble, Team Liquid would immediately make the right decision. Just immediately. Whatever the right decision is, maybe that's sending people teleporting so they can join the fight. Maybe that's sending someone off to go do Dragon or go do Baron or go take towers or something with a split push to respond. Whatever the right decision was, Team Liquid were able to pull that off, which is why Invictus wasn't able to get as big of a gold lead as they needed to win in the late game. They were able to get pretty big leads because they still were forcing the issue and being aggressive early on, but they weren't able to get just enough to be able to completely shut out Team Liquid. So there was a little sliver of hope that Team Liquid were going to be able to win those late game team fights when they hit their scaling. And that's all they had, was a little sliver of hope. But they were able to do it. They were somehow able to play flawlessly. I know I'm using that word a lot, flawless. But that's really what these series were. That's really how Team Liquid played. That's what these games were. They played flawlessly. And then that started feeding more and more into their super team. I've railed a lot recently against super teams, but one thing that you absolutely have to give credit for, even if you dislike super teams, with regards to Team Liquid, is that they were able to build a team that complemented each other very well. You have Core JJ, who was drawing a lot of bans. He was drawing like Braum or Tahm Kench and Galio bans in the bot lane in games one. Because, those are really what he's known for, is that play style of playing those kind of tanky melee supports that are either going to be, maybe a little defensive like Tahm Kench, or really aggressive and have some initiation potential like Braum. And it was game one that Xmithie played Jarvan, and he was able to play so well and have such a large impact on the game that Invictus banned Jarvan for the rest of the series. And suddenly that frees up more bans, frees up more picks, because that's a ban that's taken away. So then Team Liquid, they also have Jensen and Impact flexing the Sylas, which both of them are very, very competent on Sylas, and they had some pretty impressive moments throughout the games as well. And then Invictus has to start taking away the Sylas as well. And you're seeing all of these different, and then of course that allows Team Liquid to suddenly say, okay, now we have even new strategies that are unlocked for us because of how Invictus is approaching things. And then it all culminated in the beautiful game 4 where Team Liquid was able to pick their comfort champions. They picked Lux for Jensen mid lane, they picked Vayne for Doublelift bot lane, and they picked Skarner for Xmithie in the jungle. And all three of these champions they're not meta champions. If you're watching this video 5 years from now trying to figure out what it was that was so exciting about this series, it wasn't that Team Liquid were picking meta champions every single game, that they just picked slightly better, more meta champions. This last game, they went off the wall with their crazy, weird champion select picks, but that's exactly what they needed. I mean, that's something that people have criticized North America for a very long time, is that North America doesn't have its own identity, it doesn't have its own style of play in League of Legends, and that it just tries to copy regions like Korea rather than trying to focus on developing their own strategies with their own champions and own team compositions. And this was the perfect way to end the series, to see Team Liquid go set up their perfect, beautiful composition that nobody else in the world is going to try, because nobody else is going to go and pick Lux and Skarner and Vayne. Only these players are going to be playing these champions for this specific team, and it all culminated in the most dominating performance that there was. Invictus by game 4 were the team that were on the back foot. They were picking Tom Kenchveris because they wanted to be careful as shit against the Skarner. They were playing suddenly so passively, and Team Liquid were able to be the ones to be more aggressive, be more proactive, and completely shut out Invictus in that last game. That last game in particular was a crushing performance where Liquid was just incredibly dominant over the defending world champions. I mean, it was a beautiful series to watch. IG had everything going for them. They had the momentum. They went 9-1 in groups. They had beaten Liquid twice already in not matches that were particularly close, and Liquid were just able to come out and crush them. I made a video a couple of days ago talking about how Team Liquid is, or about how all the teams at MSI this year, the top 4 teams, one of the 3 biggest storylines was going to be how do teams adapt as the series goes on. Because Fongvu and Flash Wolves were likely not going to be making it out of the group stage, how were teams going to be able to adapt that they were going to be able to play 10 games in groups and then pretty much be guaranteed to make it into the bracket and play at least one best of 5. That's a lot of games for coaches to adapt and try different strategies. And one of the big stories this MSI was going to be, how can teams adapt? How can they change their strategies, adapt for their opponents, and figure out a way to win? And Team Liquid, they did it perfectly. They came into MSI with incredibly rusty gameplay and nobody believing in them, myself included. But they were able to clean up their play. It looked really rusty at first in play-ins. It certainly didn't perform too well. They went 4-6 in groups, but they were able to put together the perfect series when it mattered and have the best performance that any North American team has ever put on at an international event. Again, I don't know what's going to happen. They might get 3-0'd by G2 or SKT a day or 2 from now. We'll have to wait and see. But regardless of how bad things go from here, this was the most incredible and impressive performance that any North American team and possibly any Western team has ever put on before. Congratulations, Team Liquid. And I am sorry I did not believe in you. But anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed watching today's video. I will see you in the next one. But until then, thanks for watching. Good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.